for inviting me, but I will try to join. I will try to join at the end if it is possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Namaste. Jai Guru.
Namaste. Uncle Sati and Google. Let me start. Otherwise, Sati. अंतल सत्य आया है?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here. Ma'am, Yugal is...
You start. You start. You start. It is time now. You start.
Ma'am, Yugal will start. He's starting in a minute.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Yugal.
So good morning to one and all present here. I, Yugal Raj, student of Integrated Masters, along with Swati Semwal, student of Masters in Psychology and Contemplative Studies, on behalf of the entire Department of Contemplative and Behavioral Sciences, welcome you all to this amazing event, which is all about integration of mind and consciousness. Now, the part of your brain that thinks and remembers, and the state of being able to see, hear, and feel are the bookish definitions of mind and consciousness respectively that we can find. But as most of you might have guessed by now, that's not all. There's so much more to it than these primitive explanations. And we are going to learn about them today from an awe-inspiring and scholarly panel of speakers who are going to lead us to this adventurous exploration. But before that, I'd like to request all of you to close your eyes and let your senses come alive by enabling the vibrations of the mantra to sink in and settle in your soul and invite the divine to cultivate within yourself. I'll request all of you to close your eyes, please.
On the onset of this beautiful event, I would now like to invite the person who we believe to be the backbone of DCBS to welcome all the participants that have joined us today. She is the faculty dean of our department. She did her MA in psychology along with her doctorate in philosophy from Allahabad University. She holds special expertise in applied social psychology and research. Professor Rekha Singhal, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you, Swati. Thank you. And a very good morning to each one of you, and more welcome to the experts who will be speaking today. So, on behalf of the entire DCBS family and my own behalf, I welcome the three expert speakers today, Professor Mithais, Professor Rohani, and Dr. Surya Prakash Pandey. And not only the students of DCBS, but all those people who have joined from India, and I could notice some of them are from abroad as well. So very good morning to one and all. And the topic is certainly very, very interesting, not only interesting, but very relevant today. And relevant, I know I'm not the expert of the topic, even I want to learn on the topic, but mind and consciousness had always been considered as two different things, as if mind is the brain and consciousness is something like soft part, it's a soul of it. And then sometimes we also do the classification of that mind is more of a physical form. And when we talk about consciousness, it becomes more of a soul of the mind. And that's what is the integration of mind and soul. It's the psychology. And that too, now Eastern psychology had always believed in integration of those. Even the Western psychologist has also started believing in it, that there's a need of interaction and integration between mind and soul. And instead of speaking on the topic, because we want to hear from our experts, I just want to conclude in the words of Gurudev, because more than Gurudev, I think even before it came in academics as a topic, Gurudev always talked about consciousness. And I'll just quote his one line, that meditation is the way to integrate mind and consciousness. And I'm sure that many of us have experienced it, how mind and consciousness gets integrated. And when we talk about 4 levels of consciousness, Gurudev added 5th level of consciousness, that is cosmic consciousness. So once again, on behalf of myself, the entire Department of Contemplative and Behavioral Sciences and Shri Shri University, I welcome one and all to this very, very interactive, which is going to be, and we cannot have experts like what we have today. So I'll call it galaxy of experts. One is from government, one is from known in the discipline, known representing Director of Indian Psychological Institute, and Professor Rohani, who himself represent integration of West and East. So physically, he is NRI, but his heart is in India. And the screen which he has used, the Lotus Temple, that itself indicates that he is having integration of mind and consciousness. So with this word, I welcome again and pass the baton to Swati to further proceed the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a warm welcome. So most of you must be knowing of our renowned speakers, but to familiarize you more, I'd like to hand over the stage to the person who is no less than an iron pillar to our department. She doesn't only support us with all her heart, but is also up and ready to help no matter what. I take this opportunity to call upon Professor Santa Mishra, an esteemed professor of our department. She did her MPhil, PhD, and DLit in psychology, and is the chief editor of journal in Odisha Journal of Social Science.
Meeting चल रही है.
Good morning, everybody. Namaste. Jai Gurudev. Although Professor Sharma is not here, still he will be. So, Honorable Executive Registrar of our CC University, Professor B.R. Sharma, respected Dean of our DCBS Department, Professor Rekha Singhal Madam, Revered Professor Makhais Kamalizen, Honorable Professor Nazi Rohani, respected Dr. Surya Prakash, respected Professor Gilishwar Mishra ji, all the professors and research scholars from different universities like Sendai University, Japan, SVB University, Russia, Ravenshaw University, Cuttack, Amity University, Delhi, SOA University, Bhubaneswar, ISBM University, Chhattisgarh. Also, our loving Vidya Madam from Pune University, all the members of our sister university, and my dear student. A hearty welcome to you all to this national webinar on integration of mind and consciousness. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to introduce the versatile personalities among us, and I indebted my heartfelt gratitude to them to accept my invitation and to be here with us to inspire to go ahead, integrating the mind and consciousness in this crisis of pandemic COVID-19. To start with Dr. Surya Prakash, he is an international expert in administration and psychology, expert in monitoring and evaluation, young educator on good governance and public policy, served as a social ambassador in West African nations, associated with United Nations, and currently serving as Senior Advisor to Chief Secretary Odisha. Sir, I, on behalf of myself, on behalf of our DCBS department, and on behalf of this university, welcome you to this national webinar on integration of mind and consciousness. Then to say about Professor Naji Rohani, basically who is an IT software engineer, completed his PhD studies in village cooperative banking from Usmania University, and was initially was in accounting. After 11 years of stay in India, he has immigrated to United States in 1985 with his family. After 32 years of service, retired and currently working as volunteers in advisory board of the Office of Economic Opportunity for the city of Poland, Maine, and also serves as a trustee for the Audition Society of Maine, a non-profit environmental organization. In addition, he is a part of Portland Area Climate Action Team, PCAT. He also serves as a member of Portland Interfaith Clergy Group. The basic characteristic of him is his religious attitude and spirituality and dedication to Baha'i principle. Sir, I, on behalf of our DCBS department, on behalf of our Swiss University, welcome you to this auspicious occasion of the National Webinar on Integration of Mind and Consciousness. Now, to say about Professor Mathai's combination, the gem of our psychology, the cream of this occasion, जितना भी बोलो वो कम ही होगा उनके लिए. He is the fathomless ocean, and I am quite incapable enough to say a few words about him. He was born and brought up in Netherlands and having his PhD in medicine and psychology in Amsterdam. He is deeply interested in the work of Sri Aurobindo, and at the age of 27, he moved to India, where he is now since then. In the Delhi branch of Sri Aurobindo Ashrama, he helped setting up the Institute of Integral Education, Mirambika, and at present, he teaches the psychological aspects of Sri Aurobindo philosophy at SAICE in Pondicherry. He has many more publications and books on Sri Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo's complete works, and Sri Aurobindo's contribution to conscious studies in psychology. He has organized several conferences in national and international level. He is the founder member of Sri Aurobindo Center of Conscious Studies and also the founder member of Indian Psychology Institute. Only for him, I can have the opportunity to be a life member of IPI. The most interesting part to note is what we have started here in contemplation. He has started it many years ago, focusing to the indigenization of psychology to Indian Psychological Institute. Within such limited time, it is really difficult to describe about all these versatile personalities, and mostly to a saint, a rishi, the great personality with a scientific outlook in mind, like Professor Matthias combination. But one thing I must say in this platform, sir, after all, I am in this research line till date. It is only for you from that very day of international seminar at IIT Kharagpur, where you have delivered on intuitive knowledge so well and in so impressive manner, in a speculative way, you have delivered your speech about intuitive knowledge. All who were present there overwhelmed at that time. And that speech has elevated the bits and chunks of my sales and research attitude till date. You can ask my students, sir. I have expressed in my class about this fact while teaching them research methodology. Sir, you can't imagine how we all are being excited to have you all with us. I, on behalf of our DCBS department and SSU, welcome you to this webinar on integrated mind and consciousness. There cannot be a body without mind. There cannot be a mind without a body. The information and integration theory can account for several suggestions based on neurobiological and neuroscientific observations on it. Let us start the manthan on how there is the integration and contemplation of consciousness and mind in our behavior. I should not be a bar more between the deliberation of the resource person and the listeners. Again, with thanks and regards and hearty welcome to you all. I remain. Namaste. Over to Swati.
Thank you for this wonderful introduction to all our speakers, ma'am. I would now like to welcome our first speaker, who's the Senior Advisor in the Good Governance in the Office of the Chief Secretary, Government of Odisha, Dr. Surya Prakash Das, for his presentation.
Thank you very much, Swati. Especially, I would like to thank Sri University and Dr. Santa Misra to invite for this such a wonderful webinar which is happening online. But as we know that this is very, very crucial and important year in human history. I would like to thank also the whole administration of Sri University, especially the Vice Chancellor, and Dean of DCBS. Of course, many of the universities, they are also obtaining such kind of webinars, but it is really difficult at this point and critical juncture of human history that we are also, all are committed to successfully conduct such kind of webinar. Thank you once again. Definitely, I'm not going to talk more on psychology and consciousness and mind, because I know two of the eminent professors are going to be with us in a very short period of time, and they're going to discuss regarding that. But I'll definitely talk about, because we all are related to this field, especially psychology departments. As we go through, we'll definitely learn that how the integration part of this mind and consciousness is very, very crucial and important for all of us. Dear friends and students, what exactly happening in this world at this point of time? If you go through the history, it is repeating again. It is the crisis and victory is happening. The crisis and victory is going hand to hand. As you see somewhere in the world, we are collaborating for this pandemic situation, to handle this pandemic situation with absolute integration and research and various kind of collaboration throughout the planet. But the other part, you would see in the Afghanistan, in the Middle East, what exactly happening? Where is the consciousness? What is happening to this humanity right now? Somewhere it is happening integration, somewhere happening disintegration, somewhere crisis, though we are getting little victory for this, pandemic. So what does it show? What exactly it is? It is definitely related to our topic, which we are going to discuss today. Consciousness, as in the theoretical language, if you see that, it is simplest. It is sentience and awareness of internal and external existence. Despite millennia of analysis, definitions, explanations, and debates by philosophers and scientists, consciousness remains puzzling and controversial. It is controversial. There is not the significant amount of evidences that we can produce that what exactly consciousness is. Being at once the most familiar and most mysterious aspects of our lives, for us the only widely agreed notion about the topic is the intuition that exists. So friends and colleagues, it is really difficult to kind of find out what exactly the real definition of consciousness. As we know, the mind is a state, and we always need to integrate both of it for our benefits. I was also, as earlier I mentioned that I'm not going to talk much, and though we have stipulated time, though we have little time, I'm also going to talk about a little bit regarding this cosmic kind of, integration of mind and consciousness, as our dean just mentioned regarding Sri Gurudev. My association with Sri University was, till 2010, when I was also accompanied by the former, minister, central minister, Mr. Pratap Sarang, where one of the very nice seminars, symposiums was happening at the Art of Living Center, where Sri Gurudev was addressing to all of us regarding, this consciousness. Once again, back in 2010, Faith in Action was one of the global seminars which was happening at there. I was one of the participants along with the minister. We are actually sharing. He's one of my good friends, Mr. Pratap Sarangi. He was recently relieved from ministry, and he's still MP in the parliament. And I know, and you, of course, you all know that the heading Miss Vijaya, who is heading your public administration department, she was also accompanying me to that seminar. And it is really important for all of us to consider the spiritual aspects of this consciousness and mind, because it's all related. When we are calm, when we are quiet, when we're thinking, contemplating, and talking about this situational analysis, doing this analysis, maybe it is in policy, maybe it is in kind of international law. We are dealing with psychology, we are dealing with the day-to-day life of humanity. So whenever we are dealing with it, we always need an integration, whether it is in our deeds or whether it is in the state of consciousness and mind. So both are very, very crucial for all of us to kind of articulate and mindfully work on it. So dear friends, I'm not going to talk, as I have said, mentioned, we all are thinking of this because this seminar has opened, this webinar has opened our mind that we can go hand in hand, all these, webinars, and the learning that we are going to get. I hope that the Sri University is going to share the report of this webinar with us, so that we can share with the highest level of officials in state government, especially state government of Odisha, so that we can implicate this. This is going to be a model for all of us to present it, in different departments, especially the higher department of government of Odisha. I will definitely take it through, so that it would be a model for all of us to implicate it in different universities, especially established in Odisha. And also we can bring it down towards the lower school level, so that they would also understand the kind of reality and what exactly needed, and how we are going to proceed through. Dear friends, I know that both of the professors and Dr. Rohani, I know because when he was visiting last I think back in 3-4 years he was there, and he stayed with me around 6-7 days. We went we participated in various webinars and seminars, especially seminars. And Dr. Misra, which she was also one of the was also so I think without delaying this process that you are going to learn, I would definitely hand over the time, my time to them, so that they would definitely enlighten this webinar, so that our students and our colleagues would learn and listen to them. Thank you very much. I know that it is a very critical juncture of humanity. We all need to pray, and we all need to think about the betterment of the world along this line. Thank you very much, Dr. Santa Misra. Thank you very much, Dean of DCBS, and thank you the whole administration that they have invited me, especially representing the government of Odisha at this webinar. Thank you very much. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your precious insights into the matter. Taking on the baton and guiding us through the journey, we have another very renowned person amongst us. He is a part of the advisory board of at Office of Economic Opportunity for the city of Portland. Dr. Nasir Rohan, we'd like you to further enlighten us into the matter.
Thank you very much to everyone who organized this wonderful program. As you know, I am in Portland, Maine, in United States. I just checked, I am 7,643 miles away from you. And it is about over 10,000 kilometers. If my voice is coarse and my eyes out of focus, it is because it is almost 2 o'clock in the morning in Portland and a few hours past my sleep time. So it is funny to try to speak about mind and consciousness while I am semi-conscious and I am totally out of mind. So this topic of mind and consciousness is very vast, and it is not really possible to tackle in a small program in 10-15 minutes. So the subject itself has so many facets, so many sides to look into. One angle that we can look at mind and consciousness is the issue of self-consciousness, looking inward to get rid of ego and the self and to struggle to achieve perfection. This is a Buddhist/Hindu ideology that we need to look within and come to self-peace. The other aspects that we can look at is the term of mindfulness is what is used in the West, and they are using it for self-care, for self-help. Those who have, for example, high blood pressure and they have a lot of, mind problems, they use self-consciousness and self-care with mindfulness, breathing techniques. And there are many classes that are holding to help themselves to achieve this, what we call state of peacefulness. So this is another aspect of, looking at it. But what I would like to talk about this concept of mind and consciousness and mindfulness is from the Baha'i philosophy. And I would like to spend most of my time on this issue from the angle that I'm going to talk. And of course, the other angles and many other facets that are relevant to the topic are of utmost importance, but this is another angle that I would like to talk about. When you ponder the purpose of existence, when you wonder why we live, when you think about the meaning of life, and when you work past your personal, concerns and focus on a wider awareness, unbounded by ego, your consciousness transcends its animal instinct and it travels to a higher and more universal place. The Baha'i writings and the Baha'i teachings refer to it as state of consciousness of reality. The consciousness of reality is what it is termed. Now, this consciousness of reality, of course, doesn't come to us automatically. We all begin with a lower consciousness associated primarily with our needs and desires for survival and procreation as other living beings, as animals. We need food, we need shelter, mating, all these, that every human being shares with, even with animals. But moving past the lower consciousness to a higher consciousness towards the reality of life, past its daily requirements means exerting effort in a quest for meaning. Ironically, this quest for a higher consciousness, what the Baha'i teachings call the independent investigation of truth, has to happen consciously. We have to want to do it. And if we don't want to do it, it doesn't happen. And this independent search after truth that does not happen in most cases results in whatever that we are seeing today, what we are seeing in political realm, in economic realm, in social realm. Like setting out on a voyage of discovery, we each have to first make a conscious decision to go. When we decide to go, then we go. We have to want to ascend beyond the mundane and daily things to transcend the ego and its immediate needs and demands, to envision a wider horizon that allows us to travel behind the previous limits of our lives. So we have to want to discover a higher truth. According to Abdul Baha, the interpreter of Baha'i writings, and I quote, "God has not intended man to imitate blindly his fathers and ancestors. He has endowed him with mind or the faculty of reasoning, by the exercise of which he is to investigate and discover the truth. And that which he finds real and true, he must accept. He must not be an imitator or blind follower of any soul. He must not rely implicitly upon the opinion of any man without investigation. Nay, each soul must seek intelligently and independently, arriving at a real conclusion and bound only by that reality." I end quote. You know, the moment when a person decides to move past his preconceived notions and inherited beliefs marks the stepping off point on the search for a higher consciousness. Now, there is a $1 million question. You know, the question is, does human consciousness prove that a higher consciousness exists? In other words, can human consciousness exist independently of a functioning brain? So the conventional materialistic worldview held by many agrees that all consciousness results only from the brain itself, from neurons firing electrical impulses. When the brain ceases to function, so does consciousness. But there is another emerging worldview that offers a completely different perspective, that consciousness goes far beyond the material structures of the brain, exists independently of it, and transcends the physical realm. That the Baha'i view is, I quote it, "It is evident, therefore, that man is dual in aspect. As an animal, he is subject to nature, but in his spiritual or conscious being, he transcends the world of material existence. His spiritual powers, being nobler and higher, possess virtues of which nature intrinsically has no evidence. Therefore, they triumph over natural conditions. These ideals, virtues, or powers in man surpass or surround nature, comprehend natural laws and phenomena, penetrate the mysteries of the unknown and invisible, and bring them forth into the realm of known and visible." Oh, a lot of things in these few lines that I read for you, and a lot to ponder about. Now, the greatest reason for consciousness to be above material state is that the humans, unlike animals, make decisions, sometimes contrary to their own immediate benefits. When, for example, a lion captures a prey, it doesn't think of, for example, ecosystem or about endangered species or about extinction of some of the life forms. As human beings, we do think those ways. We are ready to go hungry, but we devise laws and policies that protect the environment, to save whales and the endangered monkeys and apes. These are laws that go contrary to our life, sometimes gives us harm, but still we devise it because we think above our material means. And that is the higher consciousness. So this is a great distinction between consciousness and logical mind. So the logical mind thinks of self-benefit, and consciousness considers what? It considers common good. My father was not very educated, but he used to share his wisdom through stories. And I would like to share one of his stories with you. He used to say that, this story that just imagine there was a man with his family walking in a jungle, and he was looking at beautiful forest and enjoying the nature, and he was picking some wild fruits and berries from the trees. And suddenly he realizes that in his back, there is a tiger coming towards him. So he starts running and running. And while running, he looks back and he sees that, yes, tiger is following him. And suddenly he trips over of a branch and he falls from a cliff. And while he's rolling down the cliff, he grabs one of the shrubs and it stops. Now he is hanging between the top and the ground, the bottom of the cliff. And he looks around and he sees that shrub that he is holding is in fact some berries. And those berries are sweet, and he starts eating the berries. Just imagine, on the top is a tiger waiting for him. If he comes up, he will be attacked. And in the bottom, there are some serpents and snakes. They are ready that if he falls down, they bite him. And he is enjoying the berries on the top here. And then he thinks, oh my God, my family is behind. And very soon, they would encounter the tiger. So he starts screaming and yelling to warn them to stay back and stay off. So it is exactly our story of our life, that we live in this world of matter, and we are entangled in the material tests and trials, and we fall, and we hold on life with a very small shrub and branch, and we start eating from fruits of life. But at the same time, we have not forgotten the greater good, and that is our family, our being. And this is what is supposed to be of our state of higher consciousness. And we have to look at that. We have to encourage humanity to look at that higher consciousness. So as I mentioned, this is a very vast topic. I would like to take much of your time. So I would like to end my talk just to recap that humans and animals share a common phenomena called mind, but the consciousness is a human phenomena, human characteristics. While both use this mind for self-preservation and self-care, humans use and possess this higher consciousness, which investigates the reality. Man questions the purpose of life and what is his role in this drama of human existence. To succeed in this quest, he should independently search after truth. He should not imitate and follow whatever he has heard from his forefathers without any reason. He should have open mind and heart, and he should be really ready to change and adapt. even if the findings are different from what his prior belief has, and traditions, possess. So this is the what you call the distinction of human being having higher consciousness. And I hope we all use that higher consciousness in our life. And I thank you very much again for availing this time to share with you my understanding. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful presentation. Now, today we are fortunate to have amongst us a very prominent and well-known expert in the field of consciousness studies, Dr. R. M. Mattis Cornelissen, Director of Indian Psychology Institute. We invite you on stage, sir, to help us learn more about the mind and consciousness connect.
Yeah. Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. First of all, again, both to Professor Rekha and Santa for organizing this seminar, because and for the whole Sri Sri University, because it is something that is, I think, very, very, very much needed. And it is also difficult. So it is a very big enterprise that you have taken up. As yet, there is an amazing neglect of spirituality in academics. And I would say almost there's more of a denial of spirituality under psychologists than there is under physicists. They tend to be more open than the psychological community. So there are all kinds of complications. I'm very happy that someone from the Baha'i community has spoken, because they have worked from the beginning for an integration. And it is also very good that there is someone from the government, because in the end, we have to make things practical. So I'm very grateful that this university has started, that this department has started, and of course that I've been invited to talk with you. I would like to say something about the framework in which we are discussing these issues. The people who have spoken so far are all overflowing with goodwill, and which is wonderful, and humanity definitely needs much more of it. But we may need also something specific. I don't know how much you're aware of the history of physics. At the moment, we live in a time that physics is making incredible progress. And one of the things that it started with was that people realized that gravitation was not just how it feels to us, but that it was a universal force that was active all over. And I think we have to do something with consciousness that is similar. At the moment, we have very different concepts of consciousness. I realized that in the community of the Sri Sri University, consciousness is used largely for the highest consciousness. And many people in the Indian tradition have used Chit of Chit Sat Ananda, indeed only for that highest consciousness. While when we talk about consciousness from a psychology perspective, we take a medical definition, which is indeed very much dependent on the brain, because this kind of a side effect of the brain almost. So when we talk about integration, we have first to understand actually what we want to integrate with each other. If you look a little bit at history, you realize quickly that we live in an exceedingly exceptional time. Change is going very, very fast. And the whole world is coming together. Yeah, one of the things that this epidemic has shown is to what extent everybody in the world is connected with everybody else, if only because we have the same viruses all over the place. And we are not only connected with physical viruses, but we are also connected with ideas. And as was said about the Baha'i tradition, one cannot anymore just accept one's own tradition. One cannot anymore just believe what you have been told. And it is all rubbed in because we are all surrounded by people who come from different traditions. And so nobody can take his own tradition anymore blindly for granted because there's so many clearly intelligent and good-willing people who have a different tradition in their mind. So we have to come something that goes beyond these individual traditions. And even if we leave for the time being the indigenous population of America out, and if we don't consider the African culture, which has not really found its voice yet and is likely to make a contribution in the coming years. China also is kind of isolated in its own way. But the Indo-European tradition, the tradition that involves both the Indian Sanskrit tradition and the European one, is actually originally one tradition. The languages of Sanskrit and Latin and Greek are very closely related. So originally, language-wise and even tradition-wise, there is a close link between India and European thought. And over time, they have kind of bifurcated. And in India, India started with this beautiful integrated understanding that one can still find in the Rig Veda. But over time, it got more and more interested in that higher consciousness. There is a very interesting short part of the Isha Upanishad, where it says you have two types of knowledge. One is the knowledge of the divine, the one, Vijja, and one is knowledge of the world, what they called Avijja, and it's often translated as ignorance. But it may mean more the knowledge of the many, the knowledge of the world. And it says, if you don't have that knowledge of the divine, you're lost, you live in darkness. But if you don't have knowledge of the world, also you live in darkness. Yeah, clearly that verse of the Isha Upanishad assumes that people are only interested in the divine and that they have no interest in the world, because it tells people, no, knowledge of the world is also important. Yeah, in modern times, nobody would talk like that, because for us, the knowledge of the world is super important and the divine we have forgotten. Yeah, so this is this direction in which India went about 2,500 years ago. The West in the last 500 years has moved completely towards knowledge of the many, yeah, of physical knowledge, details, the actual physical procedures that support things. And interestingly, if we bring the two together, we can get to a very deep understanding both of consciousness and of mind. Because the West has now figured out, at least somewhat, not fully, not remotely, but somewhat, how we physically process information in the brain, sufficiently to imitate it in silicon. Yeah? Computers work very different than our brain works, but both are busy processing information. So there is a commonality. And we now think that consciousness is just kind of a little add-on to our information processing. But that is a very deep misunderstanding, because consciousness is at the base. Consciousness is crucial. This old Indian idea of Satchitananda as the foundation of reality is probably one of the most brilliant discoveries of the human intellect. Yeah? It says that everything that exists must have consciousness, otherwise it wouldn't be there. It wouldn't know how to be. Yeah, consciousness is that thing that's related to qualities, and without Ananda, it would not want to be. Yeah, there must be delight in everything. Now, many people in the later Indian tradition, the more recent spirituality, say consciousness is essentially only transcendent, is outside the world. So once you discover the divine, you kind of leave, because the only really pure and powerful consciousness is outside the world. But that's not sufficient. Yeah? We need to integrate consciousness and understand how consciousness is involved in all of reality. Yeah? Satchitananda is not only the definition of the transcendent consciousness, it is also the core ingredient of the physical reality of the entire cosmos. And it is, of course, an essential ingredient of us. Yeah, because as already was mentioned, we are kind of hybrids. We are a little bit still animals dependent on the physical world, but we are also souls who are independent and eternal. Now, how do these two things go together? It is actually quite possible to come to a good definition of consciousness. One of the reasons that we have so much difficulty with is that we are our consciousness. So everybody identifies with his own consciousness. And we are all slightly different. So we all have a different concept of consciousness. But consciousness is really what we are. Yeah? The fun of the story is that the consciousness is the essence of everything that is. Yeah? A rock also has a kind of consciousness, but it is a very simple one. But it is a consciousness that tells that rock how to be exactly a rock. And that much the rock knows to perfection. Similarly, the knowledge, the consciousness in a tree tells the tree how to be a perfect tree. And that also that tree knows to perfection. Yeah? The consciousness is not in us, is not produced by the brain, but the brain does that information processing. Our brain is a kind of hugely complex model of reality, which we identify. Yeah? And that model of reality that we make, the things that we learn from our senses, that we have learned from our teachers, that we remember, all the things that go into our individual model of reality, we identify with. More or less in the same way that the rock identifies with being a rock. Yeah? Only our way we identify with us is infinitely more complex. And as has been pointed out by the previous speaker, we have a certain freedom. We can take decisions. Yeah? We are not entirely bound. And partially that is because the model of reality that our brain makes is not just a single model. We have a model of the world as we think it is, but we can also make a model of how we think it should be, or as it might be, or as we don't want it to be. So we play in our mind all the time with these different models, and then we can adjust our behavior according to the model that we prefer. Yeah? This much biology has provided for us. But there is something far more interesting. Knowledge is hierarchical. Consciousness is hierarchical. One of the problems that medical science has with consciousness is the question is what they call the binding problem. The question how it is that all of us have at any given time only one consciousness. The Indian tradition also struggled with that. We hear things, we see things, we think things, we sense things, and it is all part of one consciousness. Yeah? Even people who have a split personality at any one time have only one personality. Yeah? You have only one consciousness in which everything that you have is incorporated. It is very fascinating. The better part of it is, this oneness that consists of many parts is actually part of nature. Yeah? A tree has cells. Yeah? The cells have molecules. The molecules have atoms. The atoms have subatomic particles. There is in everything a hierarchy. Yeah? a molecule has particles and subatomic particles, and it is also part of something bigger. Yeah, a river has water and shores and all kinds of things that are part of the river, but it is also part of a landscape. So everything is somewhere in a hierarchy. And one thing which our human mind has, which is absolutely fantastic, is that our mind, the way it is biologically made, allows us to go up and down in that hierarchy. Yeah. Right now, if everything is all right, all of us are concentrated in this seminar. Yeah. But certainly, if we can also become aware of the climate crisis or the world as a whole, or the house of your grandparents, yeah, we can move widely around within that model that we have made of reality. We can focus on one very small little thing, or we can widen out into vaster things. And the Indian tradition has specialized in this art of widening out till our consciousness really encompasses everything and then flips out to a transcendent, pure consciousness beyond everything. We have that freedom. We can be busy with a very small thing, just with our one finger or something like that. But we can also move up and out of the entire universe and identify with the divine, nothing less than that. It is quite fantastic. Yeah, that is the level of freedom that we have reached. It must have started very simple biologically in the evolution. Yeah, even an animal concentrates on one action at a time. But in us, it has become voluntary. We can concentrate or we cannot concentrate. We can widen out or we can go down. Yeah, and different sections of humanity have concentrated on different things. You can learn to express the divine, nothing less than that, into dance or into painting. Yeah, you can try to be really the best possible parent or the best possible painter or scientist or whatever. Yeah, but it is all done by, on one hand, widening up into higher consciousness and concentrating down into a concrete action. And fascinatingly, we have that freedom. And I think psychology has almost wasted a century by focusing only on behavior, which is simply looking the wrong way around. Yeah, there is a nice story about, it is a Sufi story, I think, about a man who is looking outside on the street under a street light. And he's very seriously looking for something. And a person comes and sees him busy and asks him what he's looking for. And the man said, I'm looking for my keys. I've lost them somewhere. And the man naturally asks, where have you lost them? And the man says, I've lost them in my house, but in my house it is dark. I cannot see anything. So I'm looking here outside because here at least I have light. Yeah, obviously the man was an idiot, but the story is that we humans basically do all the same thing. We look for happiness. The happiness is actually inside, but we look outside. Yeah, so it was meant for humanity in general, where we look for happiness and meaning. But it applies 100% to psychology. The natural job of psychology is to study what happens inside of us. That's why it's called psychology. Psyche is the word for soul. But psychology has wasted its time trying to prove things about behavior. Yeah? And behavior is outside. And psychology has tried to be objective. But nobody wants to be treated as an object. If someone treats you as an object, you feel insulted, and rightly so, because you are a subject. Just imagine that a teacher has studied psychology and treats all his students as objects. It would be terrible. Luckily, teachers are good human beings and forget what they have studied, and they don't treat their students as objects. But if they had been good scientists, they would have looked at all their students as objects. Yeah. So psychology has gone really astray in the last century. In the long scheme of things, it may serve a purpose because it has become very precise and punctual and rigorous. But we have to learn to apply that rigor to the inside world. We have to be as precise about what happens inside of ourselves as we already have learned for the outside world. And there also, the Indian tradition can contribute something marvelous, because the Indian tradition has concentrated on pure consciousness. Yeah? Now, to the extent that you reach pure consciousness, you can look at the processes in your own mind objectively. We can look at the physical reality objectively because we are not involved. Yeah? These atoms and physical things that we study will normally not be influenced much by our looking at it. Yeah? Our mind is quite far from those things that we study in physics. If we want to study our own mind, we cannot use introspection, because then we look with one part of our mind at another part of our mind. Yeah, that is something like trying to a judge making a ruling about his own family. That doesn't work because he will be biased, obviously. Yeah? A judge can only judge people that he has nothing to do with. But if you go to pure consciousness, you're not concerned. You're not party anymore. You can watch with the pure Sakshi, the pure witness consciousness, whatever happens in your mind in a completely impartial manner, because you have nothing to do with it. Yeah? You can really watch what happens, and you're not bothered whether it is happening in you or in someone else, or whether it is right or wrong, or none of these things applies, because you're not in that judging mode. You are in the witness mode. And it is a radically different state of being. You can get close by being silent, silencing your mind, by being aware of the errors you make, by being aware of your prejudices. So you can try to clean up your mind and look at yourself as a clean mind, but then you're still looking with a mind at a mind. And there is a radical transition from a quiet mind, a mind that is just not thinking as much and as judging as much as it normally does, to a pure consciousness, which is completely standing apart. And once you're there, you can even allow your mind to move again because you're not entangled in it anymore. Your consciousness is one side, and your mental movements are in another plane. And you can watch them really like you see a movie, or like you see small children playing, or you see them outside. And that's a wonderful gift. And I think modern psychology, or I should rather say the future psychology, should be based on that. And it's not easy, yeah? But mathematics is also not easy. Not everybody can learn mathematics, and not everybody can become a top physicist. But for psychology, I think this ability to silence your mind, to look at yourself with a pure consciousness, should be a condition for studying psychology. Yeah? It is something like learning mathematics, which is needed for studying the physical world. It is a learning you have to do. So a department that is interested in contemplation and in behavioral sciences should try to find ways of teaching or training students, and I would say first teaching and training staff, to reach those inner levels of science so that they can teach the students in that way, and so that the students can become good psychologists. And this is not only a matter of knowledge. Most psychologists work in applied science. No, most psychologists become counselors or therapists or work in some applied field. There also, there is a lot of conflict about which methods of counseling work best. And I think there is very good indication that that cannot be established. There are lots of studies and lots of people who prove that this works a little better or that works a little better. But there is some good literature also that shows that actually it is not the method that matters. What matters is the personality of the therapist and the aspiration of the motivation of the patient. Yeah, and the relationship between the two. Now, if you think what the essence of that relationship is, that the client who wants to change, to overcome his difficulties, he must first of all trust that the psychologist really understands his problem. If he feels that the psychologist doesn't understand, then whatever he says, he will ignore. Yeah? So he must feel that he is understood, and that in spite of understanding his problem, this psychologist is completely convinced that his problem can be solved. Yeah, you are miserable because you were brought up in a terrible manner, or you lost your parents or your brothers and sisters or children, or you have gone through some terror. But the psychologist who fully understands how that is still has faith that you can deal with that. Now, how can he have that faith? There is only one way, and that is when he is aware of his own eternal being, his soul, his deeper self, his higher consciousness, whatever you call it. Because once you are aware of that, you're not threatened anymore by anything. You can deal with anything because everything else is minor. If you have that inner delight that is unconditional, then it doesn't matter whether on the outside you're angry or unhappy or satisfied or unsatisfied. You have that eternal joy behind you. So you're not worried. Now, if you have that for yourself genuinely, yeah, not just as a pretense, not as something you have in special circumstances or because you happen to be fortunate or whatever, but you have it thoroughly, then you can afford to have full empathy with people in all their misery, and yet know that in essence they are not, it's not essential. They can come out anytime they like. Yeah? Vivekananda, he once said, if there is something like heaven and hell, then please send me to hell, because there I can do maximum work. Yeah. Now, you can be that brave only when you're fully settled in your soul, so that you know nothing can happen to you. Even right in the middle of hell, you'll be fine. Yeah? So it is not reaching that pure consciousness, reaching that inner delight, is not only needed for developing a good theory of consciousness and a good theory of psychology. It is also essential to be able to help people properly. Because otherwise, either you have to, we learned as medical students that we should keep a distance to our patients, because that if we had too much empathy, we would not be able to help them. Yeah? But that is true to some extent, but it means that you cannot really help people. You cannot really be with them. You can only help them technically. But in psychology, that's not good enough, because the patient knows. The patient knows that the therapist doesn't want to meet him because he's too miserable. He feels it. And you can only not feel that desire to stay in distance from people if you know that your inner happiness cannot really be hurt, cannot really be changed, because it is eternal. So to the extent that you have your contact with that eternal part of yourself, you can afford to have sympathy and empathy with any kind of difficulty, any level of stupidity, yeah? Any kind of idiocy that we humans have. And we are very good at disasters. Yeah? Humans are really specialized in getting into very deep trouble, both individually and collectively. And so we need that inner certainty, that inner, permanence, joy, existence pure. Then from there we can deal with all the adventures of life. And we need it not only, again, for therapy, we do not only need it for understanding, We also need it for government. We also need it for any outer action. Because only if we act from that purity, we can act in harmony with the whole. In normal life, we all the time inevitably act out of our own egoism, whether we are philanthropic or antisocial or whatever. We work in some way out of our own ignorance and egocentricity. And it is only when that inner, much higher consciousness has penetrated and changed our nature that we can begin to act in harmony with the whole. And I think that is the future of humanity. It is a long way to go. Yeah? Reaching that witness consciousness is relatively easy. Reaching a kind of space from where you can have empathy without being crushed by the misery is not easy, but is also doable. Acting really in harmony with that inner truth, like Krishna did on the battlefield and asked Arjuna to do, that is really difficult. Because it means that not only your own highest consciousness should make the transition, you should not only kind of realize the divine, but your nature should be transformed by the divine. And that is a far more difficult and intricate process. But I think that is also the future of departments that are engaged into contemplative and behavioral sciences. They have to bridge that enormous gap between our down-to-earth, nitty-gritty, small human problems, confusions, whatever, and that higher consciousness, and aspire, use all kinds of tricks we can imagine to allow that higher consciousness to penetrate our actions and our entire being. And I think that is the end goal of psychology, and to some extent that is a very important part of humanity. So I started with a little bit about the development of physics and how important it was to understand that it only looks that the stars are moving around the earth. It only looks that the sun moves around us. It only looks that all the planets move in their own strange way around us. But once you understand how it really works, that there is a universal gravitation that has a very simple formula that you can use in all kinds of situations. In first instance, it's not intuitive because it doesn't feel that we are turning around the axis of the earth. It is very unintuitive. It doesn't feel like that. But once people accepted that, they could use a very simple formula to explain how a ball falls on the ground, how to make a bridge, how to do anything that would work. And because they could make these predictions with very simple physics and trust that they would actually work, all modern technology has become possible. And then they could use that same simple logic that seemed to work for the universe, for the stars, and for all those things way beyond us. They could use it for small things, for construction of bridges, skyscrapers, the temple in Delhi, all those kind of things, yeah, which were impossible before people could do that mathematical modeling of reality. Now, if we can do something similar with consciousness, get rid of the idea that consciousness must be the way we happen to be conscious as ordinary people, or we happen to be conscious as realized souls, and understand that consciousness is existing throughout creation. And in everything, consciousness gives things the qualities that it has, gives it the knowledge to obey the laws of nature everywhere, in the rock, in rivers, in us, in the stars, everywhere. That's the job of consciousness, the know-how, how to be. Yeah. Then, and the fact that we can move up and down in that consciousness at free will, then we can solve basically all these problems of harmony that humanity has. Because all the conflicts humanity has at the moment are conflicts of harmony. Yeah? In Afghanistan, humanity has just goofed to the hilt. Yeah, with the climate, we are messing it up. I mean, unimaginably idiotically. Yeah, and we have to solve it on our own individual level. We have to solve it economically, politically, in industry, in military. We have to solve these problems of harmony everywhere. And that will only be possible if we learn as children in the schools how to go up in our consciousness and how to come down. Small children can learn that if you want to think, you have to center your consciousness here in your head. If you want to love, you should concentrate in your heart. You cannot love from your brain. Love doesn't live here. Love lives here. And if you have ambition, you have to center still lower in your being. Yeah? And small children can learn these things without any difficulty. Yeah? And children can learn to identify with a group or identify with themselves, always identifying with something larger. And if people learn that from childhood, they will also use that when they defend one army or one country against one other army or another country, because they can understand the whole of which we are a part. And so it is feasible. And yeah, I can only have very, very high hopes and aspiration for your department, and hope that people in your department, all of you together, can really try to bridge these gaps between Indian spiritual thought, basically technical medical discoveries that have started in the West, but that are now there in India as well. Just like Indian spirituality is now very much used in the US and everywhere. Yeah? But really understand them in their essence. And in this, understand how they are related. Because in the end, we have only one universe and only one world. And it is just our mind that always sees things either from the left or from the right. And we don't combine. Which is a sign that we have to get a consciousness that is beyond our mind, our mental consciousness. Because our mental consciousness is conflictuous. We can't help it. If I use any word, I exclude another word. Even if I say oneness, someone will say, but what about variety? If I say variety, but what about oneness? Unity. Yeah? Language, our mental thinking is a very, very defective instrument. This is wonderful, but not good enough. We need something more than that. So that is the long time aspiration. And humanity may need it much faster than we think. Because we have earlier we were just visitors on the planet, no? We had no influence. Right now we are the owners. We can create life on this planet or destroy it. Or at least we can destroy it. We may not be able to create it, but we can destroy it, all right. So we have a responsibility. So we'll have to get a higher consciousness. I don't think humanity has much of a choice, because if we don't improve our ways, we have had it. We really have had it. And we are walking quite hard down that cliff that the previous speaker talked about. And before we know, we hang somewhere halfway, and they're worse than tigers and snakes. So all good wishes, all high aspirations, and congratulations that you have started on this adventure. And yeah, I'm open to questions and discussions. You have still a little time.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. That was a very erudite session we had.
Very erudite indeed, sir. In fact, I think we can't put it in words. I literally had goosebumps while listening to you, and I think just mere listening to you, it kind of uplifted us, or what, I can't describe it. But you, every word that you said, it was so profound, I must say, and the way you talked about the importance of getting connected with that higher consciousness. I think we need time to process that, but I'm sure that we have a lot of questions now. But since we have we are running short of time. We'll be taking just a few questions. So the chat is open and the participants can start writing their questions in the chat. Sir, we have a question from Yugal Raj. He's asking, isn't consciousness happens in reality only? Why was there a need to over specify, to say consciousness of reality?
I'm not quite sure if I should answer, but it depends how you define consciousness, no? Most in ordinary Western, say in medicine and all, consciousness is used just for awareness. So you can speak about the consciousness of the physical reality. That's what people mean. In the Indian tradition, there is a tendency to use that word only for the highest consciousness. Then you have one consciousness for what's beyond the manifest reality and another consciousness for the manifest reality. So both the word consciousness and reality mean different things for different people. But mentioning it like that is probably mainly needed when you mean with reality only the physical reality and with consciousness only the human one. But I'm sure that consciousness is something that is there throughout the universe. It cannot be something that's there only outside or only in us. It is way too basic. It would be very, very weird if in this huge universe, we as human beings would be the first creatures who are conscious. That would be pretty absurd. So it is rather unlikely.
I would like to add that it is the human will that flourishes that consciousness. We must have that will to use the higher consciousness. We have a lot of abilities and capacities that are inherent in us. But until and unless we decide to use that, we will not get there. And that's the purpose. That's the thing that the human will, which exists, we are beyond our, just needs and, going by our nature. It is not just nature. It is beyond and above nature that we are aware of it. Descartes says that I think, therefore I am. So we are the only ones that really think that we think of our existence. Therefore, we should think higher than our material being, and that need for will and being reminded of that will is something that is the part of job that future psychologists have to embark on, encouraging the people of the world. Yes.
Yeah, I totally support what you say. In counseling, it is very well known that the main factor actually is the motivation of the client. Yeah, he must want to get out of his trouble. And the oldest Indian text, it is called the scripture, but it was not written originally, the Rig Veda, starts with Agni. Yeah? It is an invocation of Agni, which is our will, our aspiration, the inner fire, to call the highest way of thinking, the highest consciousness, Indra, the Lord of all the mental deities that we have, down in us and multiply in us. This is fantastic text. And it's wonderful to think that the first text that humanity remembers, because the Rig Veda is probably the oldest text that humanity knows by word, starts with that word Agni, which stands for our aspiration, for the inner fire, for the divine. It's very, very fascinating. It doesn't start with a triviality about food or support or something like that. It starts with the essence. So we better focus on that. I agree there. The will is very, very important.
We have one more question in the chat box, sir. This question is by Akshay Chauhan. Sir, initially you told about different understanding of consciousness. How does modern science see it?
Just Google consciousness. You will get the answer. This is very easy to find. You will find loads of it. For about 50 years in last century, consciousness, the word consciousness was completely taboo in science. Between 1920 and 1970, it was hardly there. I have still a dictionary of philosophy. The Penguin Dictionary of Philosophy does not have an entry for consciousness. Can you imagine? It completely, science has behaved, and even philosophy has behaved as if consciousness doesn't exist. Well, if there was no consciousness, none of us would exist. At least nobody would have any idea whether we would exist or not. It is very, very weird. And since the 80s, 90s, we've kind of woken up because we can make machines that can do the information processing part of our thinking. And so then the question is, how are we different from computers? And actually, because of that, the question of consciousness has come back. But science sees it largely as our awareness of our surrounding, which is a horrible simplification. That's clearly not all that there is to consciousness. Yeah.
And may I add that, unfortunately, science today, especially the Western science, emphasizes on the physical part of our well-being. Is not even thinking about the spiritual aspect, about the moral aspect. The morality is not considered as a part of science, and that is a problem.
Yeah, very big problem. Yeah, this really has to change. I mean, the one side, it is interestingly, it is an artifact of European history. In Europe, religion became very dogmatic and centralized. And so science wanted to stay out of the realm of religion. In India, that wasn't the case. Religion was never centralized. So there was never one single authority who could decide what's false and true. In Europe, there was a single authority. And so science decided to study only physics, basically, because you could study it and leave the church to deal with moral questions, human questions, everything else, and they would deal only with nature. And that worked, but now science has become so successful that it also determines education, upbringing, law, all kind of other things. And for that, it is not good enough, because the only thing it knows how to study is that physical part of reality. And there it can really learn a lot from the Indian tradition, because yoga had never a central authority. No, it was always an open-ended inquiry. And so even in its social structure, ashrams, individual teachers who are independent and can say whatever they think is true, is very similar to actually how universities are structured. And so at the moment, it should be possible to integrate spirituality into science and leave religion for the time being out of the picture.
I am so glad that you touched on this issue, that religion in the West especially has it has become such a taboo, such a bad name, because of unfortunate play of religious leaders in the arena of politics and social issues. They have done huge blunders, and because of that, religion has got a bad name. And because of that, I personally would like to even not to mention that the word religion. We should talk about more morality, consciousness, spirituality, and whenever I talk about the Baha'i ideology, I say it is a spiritual movement. It's a spiritual understanding. I avoid the word religion because unfortunately, about the Catholic Church in the West, what it has done. About what is happening in Afghanistan, what is happening in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen. And these are all happening in the name of religion. And unfortunately, we have to also understand that it is not religion. It is politics. It is the human nature, the subhuman nature of humanity that uses the lower consciousness and not the higher consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah, this human tendency to try to impose a uniformity of thinking, whether it is in a religion or in a political party or in a national system of governance, that is extremely dangerous. And the Baha'is have suffered massively from that. And but it is all over the world. You have people who want to dominate, and they want to dominate the mind space, and that's really one of the central problems that humanity has to resolve in the coming years, because technology has made that also too dangerous, and we have to sort it. Like the communal problem, communities fighting against each other. These are issues that humanity has to sort, because we cannot go on living with them. Yeah.
Thank you
No,
so
the coming
much.
years are interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sir, you can go ahead. You can continue.
No, I have nothing to say.
So I was saying thank you so much for enlightening us about that entire thing, sir. And for sure, we need to bridge this gap between the East and the West, and the conflicts that are taking between these traditions. And we can only be guided by stalwarts like you who have been working in this field for so many years. And so it was a privilege for us. And now I would like to hand over the baton to Yugal.
So as far as the question and answers are concerned, this is going to be all the questions that we are able to take since 9 minutes of the essence. If you still have doubts, feel free to leave it in the chat box. We'll try our level best to get your questions answered as soon as possible. I'd like to call Antav Banerjee, another student of the same program, for the vote of thanks.
Warm welcome. Greetings to my respected teachers and esteemed personalities and my dear friends. I would like to start with a quote of Swami Vivekananda that never say no, never say I cannot, for you are infinite, all the power is within you. You can do anything. Today, it's our honor to share the stage with so many admirable people. I really don't want to, but I have to because everything has its end. And I believe everyone here does not want this intake of knowledge to end any day. We would like to express our gratitude to all the respected speakers for kindly donating their time and sharing their words of knowledge with all of us today. Thank you so much for inspiring, and we strongly hope to listen to you very soon. Thank you so much, respected Executive Registrar Sir, for your presence. I would love to extend my sincere gratitude to our Honorable Dean Ma'am for guiding our steps in present and help us reach the light of future. Also, I'd love to thank Santa Ma'am to steer us whenever needed. I am really grateful to Professor Nivedita Ma'am, Professor Girishwar Sir, Professor Mamta Ma'am, Professor Takahashi Sir, Professor Vidya Ma'am, Professor Abhitosh Sir, Dr. Shushmita Ma'am, Miss Sanchita Ma'am, and Miss Lakshmi Priya Ma'am, Abhitosh Sir, and all the eminent personalities for their presence and make this event more lively. Last but not the least, I extend my heartfelt regards to everyone present today. Thank you so much for investing your time, and I believe it returned you multiple times with the knowledge and deep insight. Thank you so much.
Mind and consciousness are two very well intricate and subtle subjects that give us a proper overview of our surroundings to form what we know of as thought process. The purpose of today's session was to have a look on how these two, mind and consciousness, go hand in hand and create perception and overall standpoint in life. I'd just like to conclude this webinar by extending my gratefulness to learn such vast topics from such learned people, as it's just awesome that we were able to cover such topics in such a short amount of time. I thank all of you for joining in and becoming a part of this wonderful event and making it a success. Thank you so much.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you very much for all these cooperation you made to make the seminar a successful one. I must thank Professor Mathais, Professor Rohani, Professor Surya Prakash, our madam, Professor D.R. Sharma, and all the elites present here. Actually, the session is such a delighted one and also informative one. The time is very short, and all the information they have given to us is very informative, no doubt. But there are many things to learn. There are many things to hear. There are many things to grasp in each and every word. The words Professor Mathais, Professor Rohani has used, we need the time to get into all those words and what to say the more. So I think if there will be any more chance, definitely we'll have your gracious presence, sir. And thank you very much to enlighten us in this platform. And also thank you, madam and sir, for their cooperation to make this seminar a successful one. Also thanks to my dear students, and they have also very well present everything. So thanking you all again. So anybody to say something? Ma'am, would you like to say something, madam? Anta?
No, it's just that, ma'am, we were really, we all had our fair share, we all need a fair share of time to process what amazing words that had been spoken today. And surely, I think we have an idea now, at least a basic idea of what these two concepts are and how we can have a proper connection between them. And I just couldn't help but wonder what if there would be one day where everyone will be able to connect these two minds, and how would they feel, and how different it is from what we feel today, what very spiritually realized people experience. And we are sure I'm really sure that we'll get there someday with how the generation is moving. Thank you so much, sir, and everyone who contributed, and thank you so much.
So let us end the meeting.
Now we are going to end this meeting, host.